Welcome everyone in this new video tutorial about the multiplayer combat editor. In this video we're just going to talk about the extra multiplier function built in the combat manager. So what is this? It's a little feature that allows us to basically multiply the amount of damage taken by a certain amount depending on certain factors. So if you haven't watched the video about damage armor system, I suggest you to watch it before watching this one. And because it's directly tied, the extra multiplier I'm talking about is in what way does it differ from the regular damage bonus or the regular damage mitigation or damage calculation? It's just different in a sense that it's calculated at last. So if you go to the combat manager and the function calculate total damage received, in the end of that function you have something that says get the final damage result and multiply that by the extra multiplier plus 1. So it's basically a multiplier that has a greater impact on the total calculation of the damage, since it's applied after all the incremental flat values, bonuses applied to the damage. And what is this for? It is meant to be used for things, for mechanics such as fall off damage, critical strikes, localized damage. So what are these? Critical strike is quite straightforward. If you deal if you deal a critical strike, you might want to double the final amount of damage you dealt, for instance. Localized damage is, for instance, if you hit the head of a character, or if you hit the leg, maybe it doesn't do the same amount of damage, and maybe it scales up the total amount of damage rather than just being. And if you use the extra multiplier function for localized damage, it's going to the damage mitigation is going to be applied after applying all of the other bonuses and maluses. So it's going to scale up far more the damage you dealt. And fall off damage are maybe you want to decrease the amount of damage. It's oftentimes for shooter games where you decrease the amount of damage dealt based on the range. So if, for instance, if you shoot someone with a rifle, you are going to deal less damage if he's far away than 25 meters, for instance. And so the extra multiplier is for that logic. And right now it's only used by skills to multiply their amount of damage if they do a critical strike, which is going to be the subject of another video. And if you want to use that function, how can you use that? By simply, when you apply damage, whether that be in skills or anywhere else for that matter, when you apply damage, you have the extra multiplier value which appears, and you can feed that with anything you want. For instance, if you want to multiply the value based on the range you were. So I'm just realizing there is something wrong there. We are only incrementing. We should be multiplying. If we say minus 20, no, it's working fine. It's working fine. So I was worried we weren't able to diminish the amount of damage we deal, because the example I wanted to give was with the fall off. So for instance, we are going to go in a skill. We're going to go in any skill we have, for instance BP slice, and we have a function named on projectile hit. I'm not sure if we are supposed to. Yep, we are not supposed to override that one. We are supposed to override apply gameplay effect, I suppose. So what is the function we are supposed to override? Apply effect. Why doesn't give it to me there? Apply effects, that was the function I was looking for. So for instance, if BP slice is spawning a projectile, we can check the range of, we can get the initial location of the projectile, and we can apply damage to the targets of the projectile, for instance. And what is the amount of damage? Okay, so I need to check something. Okay, so I wanted to showcase how we can mitigate the amount of damage we deal with that node, but we cannot do this here because skills are already using that logic to roll their critical strike. So we are just going to check the skills to see how this feature is used, extra multiplier. So when we apply damage with skills, we are telling the skill to have is extra multiplier based on that function, get critical skill critical roll, and in there we are saying, have you made a critical strike? If so, you are dealing 0.5 more damage. If not, you are dealing 0 damage. And you could be saying for instance 1 in there, and it's going to increase the amount of damage by 100 when you deal a critical strike. And that's how I'm using the feature, the built-in feature for in MCE. But you could be modifying this by modifying the logic that deals damage in the skill, for instance. And that's how the extra multiplier feature works. So it's going to wrap up the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it and hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.